Donald Trump's racist provocations are going to lead to violence sooner or later, and that's what he wants. Recently, he issued an executive order that was basically titled Unleash the Police. And last week, his Civil Rights Division in the Department of Justice, led by Harmeet Dillon, did a couple of things. She announced that she is shifting the focus of the Civil Rights Division away from what its focus has been for the last 70 years that made it the crown jewel of the Department of Justice. She is shifting its focus away from discrimination against marginalized communities in the United States, including black people in the LGBTQ community and women and the disabled, to focusing on discrimination against white Christians in the United States, religious discrimination, discrimination against religious people. And we all saw Donald Trump's treatment of the black president of South Africa in the Oval Office this week. Donald Trump is absolutely desperate to get black Americans out in the streets protesting. There have been a lot of protests over the last 4 months. And every protest that I've gone to has pretty much been white people exclusively. And the police have just hung out on the outer edges, leaning up against buildings. The one protest that I read about where there were a significant number of arrests was in Philadelphia, and most of the people that were arrested were black people, and the majority of those were black women. A lot of those were older black women. But Donald Trump wants racial violence in the streets in the United States, and he can't get that unless there are black people, black Americans protesting in the streets. He wants that, first of all, because he's incredibly racist and he hates black people, and he really hates black women, especially educated black women. But he also wants to use it as a pretext for his martial law bullshit. And we've all seen his immigration policies and practices over the last 4 months and what he's doing to brown people and immigrants. And he wants, he and his supporters basically want an all-white America again. They want white supremacist, male-dominated patriarchy, white male-dominated patriarchy, white supremacist country that is also an authoritarian theocracy. He also, his handpicked U.S. attorney in New Jersey, Alina Habba, who prior to representing him had been an attorney specializing in representing parking garages, and she defended him, such as the case may be, in a lawsuit that he filed against Hillary Clinton and a bunch of other people that resulted in him having to pay over $1 million in their attorney's fees, Hillary Clinton's attorney's fees. She represented Trump in the civil case in New York that he lost, and he now owes the state of New York over $600 million. And she represented him in the second E. Jean Carroll case that resulted in an $83 million verdict against him. So he rewarded her legal genius by making her the U.S. attorney for the state of New Jersey. And a couple of weeks ago, 3 members of Congress and the mayor of Newark, New Jersey, went to an ICE detention facility in Newark, New Jersey, and there was a kerfuffle, and there were 2 people. Well, there was one person who was arrested on scene, the black mayor of Newark, Ras Baraka, and then this past week, they arrested Congresswoman LaMonica McIver, a Democrat from New Jersey, whose district includes most of Newark, New Jersey. The other 2 members of Congress were not arrested. And add in the 4 months of anti-DEI. This is an explicitly racist administration. And I'm sure that it is incredibly confusing to Donald Trump as to why black Americans are not out in the streets in force as they were during the summer of 2020. And we saw all of the police violence that accompanied those protests because black people were out in the streets. The last 4 months, the protests have been all white people, primarily. And Trump and local police forces do not meet those crowds with police violence. They just don't. And, it's incredibly important, I think, that people who look like me continue to show up to these protests consistently day after day after day over the next several months or years. But we can always just go back home and at the end of the day and retreat into our whiteness. I heard that phrase from a black woman on this app. I can't remember who it was, or I would give her credit, but that just stuck with me. We can retreat into whiteness. That's always our top designation category. You know, but it's like when you look at the authoritarian playbook, you know, he's got to find an enemy within. And sure, he's got immigrants. He's been railing on DEI. He hasn't yet come out and just explain. You know, when you look at the language that he uses about immigrants, I mean, it's incredibly dehumanizing language. Refers to them as vermin, poisoning the blood of our country. And he did that during the campaign with the Haitians in Ohio, the Haitian immigrants in Ohio. They're eating the cats, they're eating the dogs. And he, since Inauguration Day, he hasn't used that kind of language explicitly about Black Americans at scale. But again, I think he's got to be just absolutely dumbfounded at the things that he is doing with his executive orders, what his Civil Rights Division and the DOJ is doing, how he's treated leaders like the president of South Africa, the things he's been doing with DEI, an incredibly racist administration. I'm sure he's utterly dumbfounded as to why Black Americans are not out in the streets. But if they do, and he gets to use violence, then he will have his enemy within the United States. He views immigrants as an enemy without to get rid of. But if he gets Black people out into the streets, they're going to be his enemy within. He's desperate for it. He's absolutely desperate for it.
Update on what the fuck is happening in Trump's America. Trump's Department of Justice is ending police reform in the same cities where George Floyd and Breonna Taylor were killed by police officers. They are not reforming anything. Instead, they're siding with the killers. In 2023, Biden's Justice Department confirmed what we already knew. Cities like Minneapolis and Louisville had serious racist and violent policing problems, and people like George Floyd died because of it. Those findings led to legally binding reform plans that were meant to stop the abuse, retrain officers, and prevent more deaths. But now Trump's team is canceling those plans and shutting down investigations in other cities too. They are defending the very systems that murdered George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. Trump's Department of Justice is not dismantling racism. Instead, it is doubling down on it. This was never about law and order. It is about control and keeping you in your place. And if you think your community is safe, you are delusional. They're coming for all of us.
Why is the media not talking about this video of Caroline Leavitt, the White House press secretary, beckoning somebody to come over to have the African American police officer move away from her? Why is the media not talking about this? I'm seeing it on social media, but I'm not seeing it in the media. Is this thing doctored? Maybe. Is this thing photoshopped? Maybe. Because the mainstream media should be covering this like no tomorrow. If this is 100% accurate, this really shows exactly what they stand for. It shows the truth of what they stand for.
Oh my God, Caroline almost stood next to a black man.
There's something else I think people are missing with this whole interaction between Caroline Leavitt and the police officer. Now, you guys are going to call me crazy, and I understand that, but what's not being said is that she chose to stand in that spot. She chose to enter that man's space. If you watch the video that is posted in the description, all right, when the president first comes down the hallway, originally they gesture for him to move out of the frame of the camera. And we all know why, all right? It's obviously not just because they, want the shot to just be the president. We know that there was a reason for that. You can even see in the way that his security gestures at him, it's like First of all, the cop does not work for President Trump's security, but the way he gestured at him made it seem like, hey, do what I say. And for starters, I wouldn't have gone anywhere. In fact, the cop moves over, but you can tell he looks back and he's like, this is as far as I'm going to go. Like, you're not going to tell me where I can and cannot move. Now, Caroline Leavitt, when they come back after the meeting with the GOP, when they come back down the hallway, you can see she could go anywhere. That hallway is big enough for her to stand anywhere, but she chooses not just to stand behind the president, she chooses to stand literally right next to the police officer. In fact, she bumps into him. She brushes into him. She did that on purpose. Now, I know everybody is making a big deal of her making the face and the gesture, looking like she was in danger and pointing at him to get him to move. But do not overlook the fact that she chose to enter into his space. Now, why do I bring these things up? Okay. Again, I know they sound ridiculous. I grew up in church. All right. I lived in the Bible Belt. I worked in churches. I have met thousands of evangelical young women just like Caroline Leavitt. Women who always get overtly racist and downright performative when they get around black men. And more often than not, in my experience dealing with these women, is that they will be overtly racist and act like they don't want to be in the presence of black men. But oftentimes, that is a way for them to cover up a secret that they don't want the people in their usual social circles to find out. And that is that they have an attraction to these men. I'm telling y'all, this is not just a theory. I've seen this behavior before. It's actually more dangerous than her just being straight up racist. Because if what I'm saying is true, and she does have that little secret, okay, she is the type of person that is willing to put people in harm's way before ever owning up to who she is or holding herself accountable. But I'm telling y'all, I've watched this clip, okay? You may call it a reach, but I've been watching this clip over and over again. I've seen the long version, short versions, up close. I'm telling you, I've seen this behavior before. She let her guard down. She did. But once she registered that she was on a camera, she had to change her behavior. I am going to take this theory with me to my grave.
This is the most ridiculous thing that has ever happened. The Negroes are just as free as we are. We have the same opportunity to work and to build their part of the town up just the same as we have. I just don't understand it and don't approve of it. I'm going to stand up for my rights.
Thank you very much. Jim Knight with WALB Television News. We're soliciting the views of Albany people on the Civil Rights Bill. Would you like to give us your views?
Well, I think if they remain peaceful, it would be a lot better than perhaps the violence that would be concerned. Well, of course, being a Southerner, I'm not for it at all.
I see.
And I just don't know how it's going to turn out. I hope we don't have any trouble.
We're soliciting opinions on the Civil Rights Bill. Would you like to give us yours?
I'm sorry, but I don't think it's the time right now. I think they have equal rights, though.
You are also seeing Christian nationalism. And this is from people like J.D. Vance, just did a recent interview about this. And he talks a lot about getting rid of the other, getting rid of immigrants because it will make America lose something. Again, straight out of the 19th century. That's the language of the KKK, for example. So certainly the language of the Ku Klux Klan in the 1920s, certainly the language of the neo-Nazis. America has never been a white country. White Americans, white male Americans have dominated the government, but it has never been a white country. So he is really looking to reinforce this anti-immigrant vision because he is planning to impose Christian nationalism, to impose Christianity. And you can see the increasing, this has been worrying me for a while. We were seeing the destruction of the U.S. government, but nobody was talking about what was kind of come in afterward. And now you're starting to see the real emphasis on Christian things, on Christian rules, Christian laws in the United States of America, which is, of course, a complete rewriting of our history. So now, if that's all the bad news, where, what should we all do? Should we all go hide on under the desk? And I do. So now, if that's all the bad news, where, what should we all do? Should we all go hide on under the desk? And I do want to emphasize that there is significant pushback on all of this. So even where I started with the big bill that they are talking about, a lot of that got significantly cut back because there was such an outcry from the American people and from the Democrats, who did things like read aloud the clause in the bill that called for getting rid of taxes on silencers for guns and to get rid of taxes on tanning beds, things that were designed really for a small group of Republican interests. They had to cut back on their original desires for cuts to Medicaid. There have been a lot of pushback on these actual measures in the bill, but there's also been huge pushback from the courts. The courts are really holding up so far. They are really pushing back and saying, no, you can't do that. This is not okay. The decisions come down every day with them saying, no, it wasn't legal for you to get rid of the Department of Education. No, it's not legal for you to impose funds, and so on. However, so far we are seeing an increasing refusal of the administration to abide by the courts. So this is the other piece here, and that's that the administration, by trying to single out people of color, usually migrants, but not always, trying to single them out, what they are doing is they are collapsing our legal system, especially over the issue of immigration. But once it's gone, it's gone. They're collapsing due process. They're collapsing the idea of paying attention to courts. They're collapsing all of that with, again, the idea of constructing a nation in which a very few, very wealthy, rich, white, and usually Christian men rule the rest of us. So we're coming to a real crunch time. Every day feels like things are ratcheting up because the American people do not want this. They're pushing back very hard. The bond markets are not collapsing. I shouldn't use that word. The bond markets are falling. There's all sorts of ways in which this is crumbling. Trump's mind is breaking. Things are not good over there. At the same time, there are enough enablers in Congress for them to be able to do things like are in this bill to say that you essentially can't hold somebody in contempt of court unless you have put up a bond before you sued. And that's going to make it extremely difficult for for courts to have any teeth in their findings that the administration is in contempt of court. And currently 3 judges are saying they think that the administration's in contempt of court. So just as that is processing, the Republicans are trying to say, whoop, we'll take that away so that you can't actually stop the Trump administration from doing this. So the courts are going to need help. Congress is going to need help. And the American people are going to need help pushing their voices. And that's where you and I come in. I am just now off the road from my last trip. I've been on the road since September of 2023. And this is what I'm going to be dedicating myself to, is getting the word out on what's going on and how to push back against it. So once again, I would urge you to do a number of things. Call your Congress critters every day. There's the 5 apps thing on your phone you can use. Get together with friends to make sure you don't feel alone. Participate in local government, your school boards, your town government. Participate in your state government. Call people, tell them what you want. Go to town meetings, whether they're held by Democrats or Republicans. Speak up, write letters to the editor, and definitely get involved at the national level where you, as I say, you call every day, but you also talk a lot about what matters to you. Now, that's not all you can do. You can also make sure that you spread videos on social media, you spread information on social media, you push back against lies on social media. Because, for example, one of the things that you see is Republicans saying, we're not hurting Medicaid. We're not hurting Medicaid. We're helping Medicaid. But what they are arguing is that by cutting Medicaid, they're getting rid of waste, fraud, and abuse, which will make the program stronger. Similarly, in the past, they've talked about making Social Security available only to many older people. And they say we're making it better because we're going to guarantee it doesn't run out of money. Well, in my book, if you get rid of those programs, you're not strengthening them, you're weakening them. And just a reminder that the United States is significantly behind any of the 38 other nations, 38 total nations, so 37 other nations that are comparable to us in theoretically being democracies and in having market economies, in the amount of taxation our people bear. We're even significant. We're almost at the very bottom. There are 38 countries. If we even got to average, not the top, but average, we would have trillions more dollars to spend every year. But we've had such profound cuts since the 1980s. We're down there, right very close to the bottom. So this idea that somehow this is waste, fraud, and abuse is something you can absolutely push back on. But now I'm going to say something I haven't said before. I talk a lot about changing the public conversation. I talk a lot about joy and making sure you're, spending time with friends, and that itself, and being happy in what you invest in, what you invest your time in, is itself a form of resistance. But I'm going to add art and music. Art especially is enormously important in pushing back against a rising fascist government. You think of the posters you see out there, you think of the things that catch people's eye. So for those of you out there who are artists and who have something to say, print those babies off and stick them to places where it's legal to stick them. If you think about what has spread protests around the world, art is always central to it. So again, we all got to bring our A game now to push back on this rising concentration of wealth and power that has already undermined our democracy, and over the course of this summer will try to destroy it altogether. Thank you for being here. I'm going to do more and more of these, and I will increasingly. Actually, today I mostly spent doing my laundry because boy, it's been a long time. So I'm not normally. I think I'm normally a little bit better prepared here, and that will get better as the summer goes on. So thank you for being here, and we got a lot up our sleeve going forward for this summer, and we're going to do this. So thank you for being here, and I'll see you sooner than you think. Take care.